thank you so much, Purusha, for such a lovely introduction, and of course for having me. For those of you who don't know me yet, so I'm Juliet Little. You're very welcome to call me Jules, and I am a lifestyle and business coach. I'm so pleased to be with you to talk about designing a life you love. So today will be about using this enforced pause that we find ourselves in to get really clear on what we want from our businesses and of course our lives in the future. So I'll talk about the power of visualization, ask you the questions that will help you get super clear on what you want, and then we'll talk about making it all happen. So now is a very natural time to be reacting to our circumstances. And a lot of us at this time of uncertainty might find ourselves in the space of life happening to us. So we are reacting to what's been happening, and I think rightfully so. We might be pausing our mortgages, furloughing our businesses, home educating the kids. So we are certainly changing our routines. We've been fighting fires, I suppose, all over the place, and understandably so. But I think a lot of us are now in a new routine, and so we're in our new normal. So we have the space to really ground ourselves and settle down and move from a place of reaction to now intentionally planning the next steps and ultimately get clear on what we really want our future to look like. And this is what I'd like to focus on today. So reimagining and redesigning our lives, using our imagination to visualize an ideal outcome. So now could be a really good time to get clear on what we want our lives to look like and how our businesses are going to facilitate that for us. The webinar is designed to be really interactive, and so as we go through the next 45 minutes or so, I'd really love to hear any answers you have to the questions, any feelings that are coming up, and of course any questions that you have. Purusha will kindly note them down and we can go through them as we go along, but we've also got some time at the end. If it does feel a bit personal, then just indicate to Purusha that you would like to keep it anonymous, and I'm sure she'll do that for you. So if we go to the next slide, what is visualization? So for some of you, visualization will be in the same bracket as affirmations. They'll feel a little bit weird, a little bit hippie, and perhaps not particularly credible. So I'm here to dispel those myths. And so firstly, I'd like to have a think about the kinds of people who visualize all the time. So we all know Olympic athletes are great at visualizing their outcomes, architects, designers, engineers, artists. If you create anything at all within your home or within your work, you visualize. And some people do this all the time at work and then forget maybe to apply it to their lives. So hopefully during this webinar, you'll see the real value in taking that skill that we have to imagine and applying it to our lives. So whether we think we believe in it or not, the fact is that we are all visualizing possible outcomes all the time. And often our lives follow the blueprints of the images that we are creating for ourselves. So just to get started, I'd love to start a little experiment with you to see if I can simply illustrate the power of visualizing and prove that we are all very, very capable of doing it. So if we can go to the next slide. Okay. So when we're done with this visualization, I'd love you to tell Purusha anything that came up, anything that you felt, and it would just be really interesting to hear. So one of the most important aspects of visualizing is imagining it in all its detail. So you would be thinking about where you are, is it warm, is it cold, what do you see, what do you smell? So in all its technicolor detail, a visualization works really, really best when you get into the detail. So it might feel a little bit weird, but go with it. So if you could close your eyes, sit up straight, with feet rooted to the ground, and take 3 deep breaths. So letting go of the day this far and really clearing your mind. Now imagine it's a warm and sunny day and you are standing in a lemon grove in Tuscany. The sky is blue and cloudless. It's about 4 in the afternoon, so it's really warm, but not too hot. And the ground beneath you is really dry and dusty. As you take a slow breath in through your nose, you can really smell the perfume of the lemons in the air. The fruit on the trees are perfectly ripe. And you walk further into the grove and stop at a tree that is laden with fruit. You reach up and you pick one of those perfectly ripe lemons and roll it between your hands to make it really soft. So now taking a penknife from your back pocket, you slice out a very thick and very juicy lemon wedge. Taking that slice between your thumb and your finger, you bite down and you feel all the sharp and acidic juice in your mouth, and then you give it another bite, and this time you're really chewing the pulp. So now gently open your eyes and let me know what you're feeling physically, or let Purusha know. I know for me, my mouth is watering, and I get the kind of goosebumps that I get when I have a really fizzy sweet. So something kind of makes me really feel like I'm shuddering. Did anyone else get any physical reactions to that? Okay, so I've got eyes watering from Laura. I can really smell the citrus from Nicola. Mouth watering from Mason. Yeah. So a bitter taste in my mouth from Michelle. So what that shows us is that when we visualize, our mind actually has the power to affect us physically. So that just by imagining something, we will feel the outcome. Now, as I said before, all of us visualize all of the time, and it's having a physical effect on our lives. And so that's why it's so vital to be aware of the future that you're creating with what you're visioning. So for me, I know at the beginning of the COVID epidemic, I imagined all the potential problems. So I was, of course, worrying. And Purusha, if we can go to the next slide now, that would be great. So I was worrying about the time the kids were having away from school and what impact that would have on them. One of my daughters is dyslexic, and so she's already really struggling. And so my mind went to her maybe not passing the entrance requirements for the school that she'd really love to attend. Another thing I suppose crossed my mind was, you know, would my husband be made redundant, and would that mean that we'd default on a mortgage? And I know I was certainly worrying about my my dad and how vulnerable he was, because he could so easily be taken by the disease. So these were all of the pictures that I think I was forming in my mind at the time. And I think that was quite natural. I think most of us kind of had our thoughts go to what might happen. So I was visualizing in a passive mindset. I was worrying. I went to that passive mindset, and I think I was right to consider these things. You know, all of us worry all of the time, and I think it's a really natural response. There were all possible outcomes, and so I wanted to mitigate them as much as possible. Visualization is not about pretending that problems don't exist or wishing things away with relentless positivity. If we can go on to the next slide, Purisha. So the trick is accepting what you can't control and moving away from the worry and fear. So getting away from that passive mindset to an optimistic and mindful mindset. So we do that by looking at the wider picture or the bigger vision in our lives. So in my case, it was about accepting all the things that I couldn't control and focusing on instead on what I could control and what was important. So why is a vision for your life so important? And if we go to the next slide. In the words of Yogi Berra, who is a Yankees baseball player, or was a Yankees baseball player with an extraordinary career, he said, if you don't know where you're going, you might wind up somewhere else. And I think a lot of us wind up in places that are fine, but if we're just aimlessly kind of stabbing in the dark, we might end up at a place we really don't like. And so that's why it's so important to really think about and design the life you want. So if we change slides, we'll have a look at what to do if you're not entirely clear on what you want, or if you think you want something but there's just no chance of that happening. So it's really not unusual to not know what you want, or to have some idea but not really have thrashed out all the important details of what's happening. So over the next few slides, I'm going to ask you some questions that will give you a really good roadmap of where you want your life to be within the next 5 years. What I'd really love is for you to be super honest with yourself and write exactly what you want. So not what you think you might be able to achieve. It's what you would really dearly love to happen in 5 years' time. Not what you think you should want if you're a better person, or, you know, if not what you think you should, somebody else wants you to want. It really has to be really honest and really truthful. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, I will just say this isn't a fixed thing, so you can be really flexible. It can evolve, so this is just a really great starting point. Don't overthink the questions, just write down what you think. And then, you know, we have these slides afterwards, so you can go back, grab yourself a cup of tea later and have a really good think and kind of develop your visions around it. It's actually just really fun. You can just get really detailed with it later on. So I will ask a series of questions. And I'd love you to answer each one as if you were living your ideal future in 5 years' time. So question 1, when somebody asks you what you do for work, how do you respond? So in 5 years' time, when somebody asks you what you do for work, how will you respond? Okay, we go on to question 2, Purisha. Just give you a couple more moments on the first question. And then question 2, describe your physical settings in as much detail as possible. So where do you live? Where do you spend your free time? So in 5 years' time, where are you living and where are you spending your free time? Some clients have said they might like to be by the sea, another in a beautifully designed barn. And it could be that you're in the surroundings that you'd like to be in 5 years' time, and you just want to add to it and you want to grow it in some way. Okay. So if we go to question 3, I'll just give you a couple more moments. So question 3, describe the people surrounding you in your business and your personal life. And if any of you have a moment, let us know what you're putting. So the people you're surrounding yourself with in your business and personal life. And then question 4, what is the atmosphere in your business and your personal life, and how do you contribute to that atmosphere? So what's the atmosphere in your business and your personal life, and how do you contribute to that? It might be relaxed or really innovative. It could be a laugh a minute, so really fun or creative. Okay. And then if we move to question 5. So in 5 years' time, what are you most proud of? In 5 years' time, what are you most proud of? And then question 6. What is your favourite way to spend your downtime? I know for me, I'll be surfing. And then if we go on to question 7, when somebody asks you for mentoring advice, what do you tell them? When somebody asks you for mentoring advice, what do you tell them? And this is a really good one, because what you put here is probably advice that you could listen to right now. Advice that you could take yourself. When somebody asks you for mentoring advice in 5 years' time, what will you tell them? Okay, and then when you're ready, we'll move to question 8. Give you just a few more moments. Okay. The question 8 is, describe the steps you had to take to get where you are. Describe the steps you had to take to get where you are. And then question 9 comes with a bit of a hazard warning. So, do you have any regrets? And then explain. Now, when I did this the first time, it was quite a while ago, my regret is that I didn't spend enough time with my parents. So they live a little far away and we don't see much of them, and especially now. But I thought about that and I thought, gosh, I would like to fix that before it really is a regret. And they've just actually had an offer accepted on a house 4 doors down from us now. So this is really powerful stuff. So you must be careful what you wish for. Okay. And then on to the last question. What would you have done differently to get here?
So Juliet, we've had a couple of questions come in on the chat. Richard is saying, should it be so hard to answer that first question, which was, what does when somebody asks what you do for work, how do you respond?
Should it be so hard? Well, I suppose it depends why you were finding the question so difficult. If it's because you are currently doing something that you would not want to be saying in 5 years' time, then I think it's just a really good chance to really think about what would be the coolest thing that you can say. So, so if you were to ask somebody in 5 years' time what they did for a living, and they answered with something that was made you just think, that is awesome, that is everything I wish I could say I did, I think maybe try and reframe it. But these are hard questions.
They definitely are. And Ellie has asked that she sometimes finds it hard to know what she wants and if the idea is really for someone else. Do you have any tips on that? Yeah,
I do. So, and this is why I said at the beginning, it's really good to get very, very honest about what you want. Because when we try and guess what other people want and try to live what we think they want from us, I think it gets very muddled and very confusing. And I think the only way to get really happy with where you want to be in 5 years' time is to be really honest about what you want. And with things like this is very much something you can do by yourself, and someone else can come along for the journey, or it might take them a little bit longer to get on board. But you can't make other people share your vision. Your vision is for you and for your life. But the hope is that you're so happy and you're so successful and you feel so great about where you are in 5 years' time. You know, everyone will want to come along for the ride and to also be, you know, bringing their visions and their ideas into it too. And that's an interesting question. My husband, he would like to have a yacht in 5 years' time. Now, I don't share this vision at all. I've never really wanted a yacht. It's not my thing. But I would like to live by the sea. So so they fit together. You know, if he wants to you know, aim for that, that's fantastic. I'll certainly be on the yacht with him, and they go hand in hand. But we've got different visions, and so I'm working on mine. He's working on his, and like we're very happy to support each other in what each other wants.
So perhaps that answers then the question, which is, should these questions be asked in answered in 2 parts? So should we answer them from a work perspective, and should we answer them from a family, personal perspective, or do the kind of 2 integrate and overlap each other?
So what I would really love everybody to have is a business that supports their lifestyle. So the choices that you make in your business are based on what you want to be living in your life right now. So it's not a case of you going to have to work yourself to death over the next 5 years before you can have, you know, that dream of living by the sea or living in the barn. You get clear on your life and what you want, what your priorities are, what you want your downtime to be, and you build a business that works in around that now. And actually, we're in a time during COVID where loads of companies, and I was talking to one in particular, as Navico. They are they've been so successful in their remote working, they now want to be world's leaders in working remotely. And so now this is freeing up the time of all those people who are commuting into work, where they choose to live. It's suddenly opening a whole heap of options to people. And so this is a time to start really considering, well, what am I going to do with that time that I was commuting, or that time, you know, that I was where I was living? Where do I actually really want to be living? And how can my work or my career or my business facilitate that life that I want? And so for me, they are very much one and part of the same thing.
Brilliant. I know some people probably would like a copy of the questions again, and we will email this presentation to you so you can take time to really digest them and think about them properly. So we'll let Juliet carry on now, but we will share those with you if you want to take a bit more time to have a look at those in your own time after this talk.
Brilliant. So now we should have a pretty good understanding of our vision in or our lives in 5 years' time, or at least a little framework from which we can now grow and develop those ideas. And the real key is to grow that vision. So embellish it, picture the kind of people that you're with, picture the scenery, and make it really alive as you can. So add the smells, whether it's the salt water in the air or the coffee in the kitchen that you've just installed into your home. Really start thinking about those details. So you start to kind of flesh it out and add details as you go along. A really powerful way to do this is to create a physical picture. So some people find vision boards really fantastic, or they simply write it down. People who are particularly visual create these boards that you see every day. Others do it a bit more discreetly, so might have a ton of Pinterest boards where they're pinning the things they like. And I know I have a few of those when I'm thinking about what garden I want or what I want the house to look like. You know, these are all visual reminders of what it is we're aiming for. Personally, what I find most effective is I write down the details as they come to me. So on a scrap of paper, it's usually the back of a torn envelope. I write what it is I want on the back of this piece of paper and shove it in a jar by my sink. And so we all do it, and we add to it all the time. So when the kids want something, they add to the jar. I haven't read all the ones that they've added yet. We'll get to that. So an example was when Skip, my husband, wanted to go to Tokyo. And we just renovated our home and had literally spent every last penny that we had in the bank and a little bit more. But he really wanted to go and actually watch the Hong Kong Sevens with his friends. So he put it in the jar. And you know, this was out of the realms of possibility at the time, but 6 months later, he was at the Hong Kong Sevens, having flown business class via Singapore for a work trip. So we had no idea how it would happen. We just got really clear on the fact that that's what he wanted. We put it in the jar, and it just transpired, it worked out. So this stuff really works. And you just don't hold on to how it's going to happen. One way or another, we get there in the end. So once you know what you want, it's time to start talking about it. So you need to speak it. So if you see me in the hub, you can come and tell me about it. Tell your partner, call your mum, tell the dog, or just say it to yourself. But the more you say it out loud, the more it becomes a must and not just a would like. So psychologically, that makes all the difference. It starts to become real, and you start changing your behavior towards that goal. And then you just start. So, you know, this isn't something you do when you've lost a stone. This isn't something you do when you have had a haircut, or when you've saved the money, you look at where you are now with what you have and you make a start. There's no delay. You get really happy with what you've achieved so far, and then we move on from that point. So now we know this big goal. We need to break down this huge vision and make it smaller. And this is where you can kind of park that for a little bit and start setting out your smaller goals, and you start visualizing and designing those to start forming kind of your journey towards the bigger goal. I can't believe I just said journey. So these little steps that you take become strides, and then every now and then an opportunity comes along, and my mum calls these opportunities wild horses, and you grab them and you hang on for dear life, and then suddenly one day these little steps which have turned into strides, you know, plus the wild horses which you've grabbed, have just taken you to where you want to be, and you realize that you are living the vision that you made for yourself. So then how do we take it and make it practical, and most importantly, I think, make this vision really believable and achievable for you? So in the coaching world, we love a SMART goal. There's nothing better in getting you to where you want to be. So Purusha, I told you that I thought of you and your goal to row across the Pacific. So I hope you don't mind if I use it as a really clear example. So Purusha plans to row, and it's just incredible, from San Francisco to Hawaii. So it's this huge and challenging goal, and she expects to achieve it. But I imagine she doesn't expect to achieve it tomorrow. So she might find herself getting to the point of using SMART goals. So although I think she's a lot further on than this, let's just say that she's starting from 0. So now her first goal might be to row for an hour, and she wants to build up to this by next Thursday. So the goal is specific. She wants to row for an hour. It's measurable. It's to go from no rowing to an hour of rowing. It's attainable. So rowing for an hour seems attainable, I think, to most people. If we trained a little bit, we could probably all manage that. It might be a push, but we can all manage it. And it's realistic. So if she has a rowing machine and she has an hour in the morning, then yes. And lastly, she can build up to this over the course of a week, and will have achieved this by next Thursday. So we've got that time scale. Now, if any of that wasn't possible, we'd break it down to a smaller goal. So let's say if it wasn't realistic, she doesn't have an hour in the day, her smaller goal would be to set herself the goal of finding an hour in the day. And then she could achieve that almost instantly. I'm sure she could do that by tomorrow, and then she would go on to this next step. And then she might, having reached this first SMART goal, want to set herself the next goal of maybe rowing 3 hours once a week for the next month. So that's a SMART goal. Now, we all have those days when it just doesn't go to plan, or we are really triggered by something and something comes up to completely derail us. And that's often when kind of the negative thoughts come in, that we can't do it, who do we think we are, that's utterly ridiculous, someone else is doing it. And this is where we feel like giving up and like it's never going to happen. So those triggers come along, usually on Wednesdays, which are hump days for me. You know, they happen, and that's the bit where you have to watch out, because that's the bit where you just let go of your vision, let go of the design that you have for your life. So I know when I feel like this, it all feels completely impossible and pointless. And my advice would be to notice what has triggered you to feel like this, to accept it, And, you know, if you need a day off, take the day off, and be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up about it or call yourself useless, which I think is a common one. And the trick is how quickly you get yourself back together and back on track and feeling like this is something you can achieve. So another thing that we could do is make a list of all the things that we do that make us feel really great. Now, this isn't something that makes us feel really great really quickly and then we feel rubbish, like drinking a bottle of wine. This is something that we know will make us feel brilliant in the long term. It might be a bit painful. So, for example, going for a run. So if you can start making things, a list of things that you know make you feel amazing, and actually feel free to share it. It could be meditation, it could be chatting to a friend or meeting up with a friend, it could be walking. Let me know what you've got. Open water swimming, that's awesome. Love that. Calling my best mate for a natter. Must have a very nice best mate. Boxing, fantastic. So if we write all of those things down, so write ourselves a list of maybe 5 things that we know make us feel amazing. Journaling is a great one. Thanks, Jill. Okay. So this list is your toolbox, and it's what you go back to even when you feel dreadful. You go back to it and you know that it will get you back on the right track. There we go. So write that list. Maybe if you've got your toolbox, it'll be great then if you could write down your top 3. So for me, this is running outside. I get myself a green juice. It tastes terrible, but it makes me feel amazing. And then also I listen to affirmations. So while I'm running, I pop something on my iPhone that is just nice, and it's kind of drowning out the negative thoughts that I might be having. So I know with those 3 things I can turn around my mood and how I'm feeling about life in less than an hour. So I've really honed those down, and then you've got the rest of your toolbox to just add to it and to build on it. Okay. So if we go to the next slide, and those are some of the toolbox ideas. And so I'm aware of the time. So just to finish up before we have any questions, when I do something that feels enormous and just too big, I go to this quote, and it's start now, start where you are, start with fear, start with pain, start with doubt, start with hands shaking, start with voice trembling, but start and don't stop. Start where you are with what you have, just start. And then I generally get going after that. So before we go to any questions, I am aware that many of you might need to get back to your work or to your kids, and so I'll say thank you for giving me your time today. I really, really hope you found it helpful. And of course, thank you to Purusha and Nicola for having me. What a wonderful service you guys have provided us with over the last few months. So thank you so much. Please do get in touch with me if you have any questions or you'd like to share with me what you took from today. I always find it amazing to hear how people got on. And if you enjoyed it or took something from it, then it would be great to have a shout out on one of your platforms. So LinkedIn or Instagram, I'm really trying to grow those 2 platforms. So I'd really appreciate that. So my details are all up on the screen. And over to you guys for any questions.
Oh, Juliet, thank you very, very much. My goodness, those questions were tricky. I was busy scribbling them down. I can't even think of answers for some of them. So that's really some thought-provoking questions there for many of us to go away and have a think about. Lots of people are saying they really, really like the quote, and you shared this with us when we spoke last week, and I agree. And it really did make me think that we are, in this current time, it can feel overwhelming and you just don't know what to do and where to go. So even just making a start and looking at those goals that we have and thinking about, hang on a second, I've got my sort of my 5-year goals and I know where I want to be, but actually I've got to start breaking it down and I've got to make a start and just do one thing at a time. So I think just being reminded of that, we all know it sometimes, but we forget it. So just being reminded of that is really incredibly useful. So thank you very much for that. So please do drop any questions into the chat. But one of those things when we're looking at goals is quite often it's so much, it's too big, it's overwhelming, you don't know where to go, and your mind starts to wander and you start to think of all sorts of different wild and crazy thoughts. So how can we remind ourselves back to centering ourselves? How can we remind ourselves how to do that when our thoughts do start to run wild?
So for me, it's thinking of the one thing. So not to go ahead with millions of things that you have on your to-do list, but the one thing that will get you one tiny step closer. So I call them little tweaks, actually, but that one thing that will get you closer to your bigger goal. And then when you've done it, and maybe it's sending the email, maybe you've got to book the flight, whatever it is, so far away from your goal, but it's a step forward. And so always just thinking, what is the one thing that I can do that would get me towards my goal? Doing it and then being cool, and then let it go for the day. There's too much to do and you've got to homeschool the kids and you've got to do your tax return and you've got to do everything else, and be really easy with yourself and kind to yourself, and just on a daily basis think of the one thing that will get me towards that. And they compound, and over time, you just start living it, and it just snowballs. It has that snowball effect of getting you to where you want to be.
If your 5-year plan doesn't quite go according to plan, so for example, you use the analogy that your husband would like a yacht and you'd like to live by the sea. So the two obviously go hand in hand. But if you get to year 3, year 4, and that looks like it's not happening, is that okay to reevaluate your goals at any point? Do you then have to kind of think another 5 years ahead? Or do you think circumstances have changed so much, or actually I've changed my mind, I don't want a yacht anymore, I would like a Formula 1 car or something like that? Is it okay to change those goals?
Absolutely. And I think what it's doing is, so what is a yacht giving you? Well, a yacht's giving you the time off work, it's sitting on the sea, it's time with friends, it's a sport that you really love to do. So actually the yacht doesn't really matter. I think it's the journey of getting there. And I've used that word journey again, honestly, but it is that. And along the way, you're gearing yourself to that life that would allow it. So interestingly, I don't think we plan to live on the beach, but we plan to have a place near the beach or somewhere we can go to on holiday. So this vision of a yacht would be brilliant and absolutely wonderful if it happens. Maybe it'll be year 6 or maybe it'll be year 10. But in getting there and getting ourselves to the place that we want to be and surrounded by the people we want to be surrounded by, that's actually the living and the bits that's really most important. And then things will change along the way, like they always do, and you just reevaluate and you keep making more plans in line with what you want.
Brilliant. I'm conscious that we are close to time now, and I think Mason's asking how you can help him achieve his goals. Well, I don't think we know what your goals are yet, Mason, so I'm sure Juliet is really happy to hear from you. We've popped her contact details, it was on that last slide, and we'll again share those with the email that we'll send to you. So I'm sure Juliet would be very, very happy to hear from you. And Juliet obviously does face-to-face work, but is also working over Zoom with clients remotely while we are all observing social distancing rules. So please do get in touch with her. It's half term next week, so for many people they're going to be on holiday. So I think the key thing that I'm taking away is that visualization piece. I would like to be on a beach somewhere, smelling the sea and that salty kind of air that goes around, and everything that goes with the beach. So I'm going to be closing my eyes in my garden and imagining that I'm on the beach, and I'm sure all of you out there will also be doing the same. So thank you for sharing that visualization piece with us, Juliet. And thank you everybody for joining us today. We have got some more motivation in isolation events coming up next week. We've actually got yoga tomorrow, so if anybody would like to focus on some breath work yoga, that is yoga nidra that we have going on. And for any parents out there who are really concerned about how to manage the uncertainty that children are feeling, we have got an evening workshop going on next Thursday. So do have a look back at the Eventbrite page. We are publishing events on there all of the time for the next coming weeks. So please do have a look, and do drop into our coffee shops, which happen on a Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday each week at 3:30. We are always here, and we are always very excited to invite you in for a quick chat. So thank you again to everybody, and thank you again to Juliet for sharing all of that information with us today. It was really, really useful, and I'm going to go away and have a think about those questions, as I'm sure everyone else is too. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.